Hey, what is up, everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
In the grim darkness of the far future, there exists no greater symbol of the Emperor's authority than an Inquisitor. These agents of the Holy Ordos wield power that can topple planetary governments, command space marine chapters, and condemn entire worlds to destruction. With a word, they can end lives. With a seal, they can mobilize armies. With their judgment, they shape the fate of billions. They are humanity's ultimate defenders against corruption, heresy, and the alien threat. They are feared by friend and foe alike, walking the Imperium with the Emperor's own mandate burning in their hearts. But what happens when one of these mighty servants of humanity falls into the hands of the galaxy's most brutal and unpredictable Xenos? What becomes of an Inquisitor when they are stripped of their authority, their weapons, their retinue, and find themselves at the mercy of creatures that know no mercy? What horrors await when an agent of the Imperium becomes a captive of the Orks? This is not a tale of heroic last stands or glorious martyrdom. This is something far more harrowing. This is the story of survival in the most nightmarish conditions imaginable. This is about what it means to be powerless in a galaxy that respects only strength. This is about the ultimate test of faith, will, and humanity itself. The scenario of an Inquisitor captured by Orks represents one of the most terrifying fates that can befall any Imperial servant. For someone who has spent their entire life commanding respect and obedience, who has never known what it means to be truly helpless, the psychological shock alone could break a lesser person. Add to this the physical brutality of Ork captivity, the constant noise and violence of green-skin society, and the ever-present threat of becoming an unwilling participant in some mad doc's experiments, and you have a situation that would test even the most hardened warrior's resolve. The contrast between what an Inquisitor represents and what they become in Ork captivity is stark and horrifying. From wielding the power of life and death over millions, they are reduced to just another piece of loot, another curiosity for the Orks to prod, poke, and ultimately use for their own amusement. The Rosarius that once protected them with a shimmering force field might be torn away and worn as a crude trophy by some knob who doesn't understand its purpose. Yet the digital weapons that could reduce enemies to ash with a gesture become scrap for a mech boy's latest contraption. Even their symbol of office, the inquisitorial seal that opens every door in the Imperium, means nothing to creatures who cannot read and would not care if they could. Yet within this nightmare scenario lies a test that few other situations could provide. An Inquisitor captured by Orks must rely solely on their own inner strength, their training, their faith, and their determination to survive. They cannot command. They cannot requisition aid. They cannot fall back on the vast networks of power and influence they once commanded. They are alone, truly alone, in a way that perhaps they have never been before in their service to the Emperor. And the Orks themselves present a unique kind of captor. Unlike the Dark Eldar, who would torture with refined cruelty and sadistic precision, the Orks are brutal but oddly straightforward in their violence. Unlike the forces of chaos, who would seek to corrupt and turn the Inquisitor to darkness, the Orks simply see them as another resource to be used until it breaks. There is no malice in the way a Dark Eldar might savor suffering, no twisted philosophy like a chaos cultist might espouse. The Orks are just being themselves, loud, violent, and utterly indifferent to the suffering of others. In some ways, this makes it worse. The Inquisitor cannot even hope to understand or manipulate their captors through shared darkness or twisted logic. The Orks operate on a level so fundamentally alien that conventional methods of resistance or manipulation simply do not apply. But the Imperium trains its Inquisitors to face many threats. They are prepared for heresy, for demonic corruption, for Xenos infiltration. But nothing can truly prepare someone for the sheer chaotic brutality of being a prisoner in Ork society. The noise alone, the constant roar of engines, the clang of metal, The guttural shouting of thousands of orcs all vying for dominance can drive the unprepared to madness. The smell, a mixture of fungal growth, engine oil, blood, and the unique reek of orcoid biology, is overwhelming. The violence is casual and constant. Orcs fighting each other for entertainment, for status, for no reason at all, with the prisoner forced to witness or even participate. And yet, an Inquisitor is not just anyone. They are among the most formidable individuals humanity can produce. Selected from the most promising candidates, trained in ways that would break ordinary people, enhanced with the finest equipment the Imperium can provide, and armed with centuries of accumulated knowledge about the Emperor's enemies. If anyone can survive this nightmare, if anyone can find a way to endure, to resist, to perhaps even escape, it would be an Inquisitor. But survival comes at a cost. The question is not just whether an Inquisitor can survive capture by Orks, but what that survival will cost them. What parts of themselves will they have to sacrifice? What compromises will they have to make? And when, if they finally escape or are rescued, will they still be the same person who was captured? Will their faith remain unshaken? Will their mind remain whole? Or will they carry the scars of their experience for the rest of their days, haunted by memories of a time when they were powerless, when the Emperor's protection seemed very far away indeed? To understand this scenario fully, we must first understand what an Inquisitor truly is. We must comprehend the nature of the Orks and why they are among the most dangerous Xenos in the galaxy. We must explore how such a capture might occur, what the experience of captivity entails, and what possibilities exist for escape or rescue. Most importantly, we must consider what this experience means for both the individual Inquisitor and the wider Imperium they serve. Understanding the Inquisition. The Holy Orders of the Emperor's Inquisition stand as one of the most powerful and feared organizations in the entire Imperium of man. Armed to be an Inquisitor is to wield power that few can comprehend, and fewer still can challenge. These agents operate outside the normal hierarchy of imperial authority, answering only to their fellow Inquisitors and ultimately to the Emperor himself. Their authority is absolute, backed by the inquisitorial mandate that grants them power over every imperial institution, from the lowliest clerk to the mightiest chapter master. When an Inquisitor displays their seal, that symbol of crossed bars with the eye of the Inquisition, doors open that would remain closed to planetary governors. Resources become available that entire sectors might struggle to muster. The seal is not merely a badge of office. It is a declaration that its bearer speaks with the Emperor's own voice, and to defy them is to defy the master of mankind himself. But this power comes with a terrible burden. Inquisitors are tasked with protecting humanity from threats both external and internal, from the corrupting influence of chaos to the predations of alien species, from the insidious danger of heresy to the weakness of mutation. They must be prepared to make decisions that cost billions of lives, to condemn entire worlds if necessary, to sacrifice anything and anyone to preserve the Imperium as a whole. It is a lonely, heavy responsibility that few can truly bear. The path to becoming an Inquisitor is long and arduous. Most are recruited from the Schola Progenium, those institutions that train orphans of imperial servants to continue their parents' work. From childhood, these candidates are tested, trained, and shaped into potential Inquisitors. They learn combat, both armed and unarmed. They study history, Xenos biology, the nature of chaos, and countless other subjects. They are taught to resist torture, to withstand psychic assault, to maintain their faith, even when confronted with horrors that would break ordinary minds. Those who show the most promise are eventually taken as acolytes by existing Inquisitors. This apprenticeship can last decades, during which the acolyte assists their master in investigations, learns the practical realities of inquisitorial work, and is gradually entrusted with greater responsibilities. The acolyte must prove themselves repeatedly, demonstrating not just skill and knowledge, but the judgment and strength of will necessary to make impossible decisions. Only when an Inquisitor believes their student is ready do they recommend them for full inquisitorial rank. It's a decision that requires the approval of multiple other Inquisitors. The Inquisition itself is divided into numerous ordos, specialized branches that focus on particular threats to the Imperium. The three major ordos are known throughout the Imperium, though their activities are shrouded in secrecy. The Ordo Malleus, the Hammer of Demons, specializes in combating the threat of chaos and demonic incursion. Its members are experts on the ruinous powers and work closely with the Grey Knights, the Space Marine chapter created specifically to fight demons. The Ordo Hereticus, the Order of the Inquisition, hunts heretics, witches, and traitors within the Imperium itself. They root out corruption in the ecclesiarchy, investigate cults and forbidden practices, and work with the militant orders of the Adepta Sororitas. The Ordo Xenos focuses on alien threats, from the ravening Tyrannid hive fleets to the mysterious Eldar, from the expansionist Tau to, yes, the brutal Orks. Members of the Ordo Xenos often work with the Death Watch, Space Marines seconded from their chapters to specialize in xenocide. Beyond these three major ordos exist numerous minor ordos, some with only a handful of members, each dedicated to specific threats or areas of study. There is an ordo that monitors the navigator houses, another that investigates temporal anomalies, even one dedicated to studying and combating the Ork menace specifically. The exact number and nature of these minor ordos is known only to the Inquisition itself. Regardless of their ordo, all Inquisitors share certain characteristics. They are among humanity's most capable warriors, trained to a level that matches or exceeds even veteran Imperial Guardsmen. Many are skilled psychers as well, having undergone the soul-binding process that allows them to safely use their powers in service to the Emperor. Even non-psyker Inquisitors possess formidable mental defenses, able to resist psychic assault and the corrupting whispers of chaos. Their equipment reflects their status and resources. An Inquisitor typically wears powered armor or advanced carapace armor, often with integrated systems for various purposes. They carry weapons ranging from venerable bolt pistols to exotic digital weapons, from power swords to inferno pistols. Many possess conversion fields or refractor fields for defense, or the Holy Rosarius used by those who serve the Ordo Hereticus. Their equipment often includes specialized tools for investigation, from auspexes that can detect hidden passages to devices that can analyze substances for taint or mutation. But perhaps their greatest resource is knowledge. Inquisitors have access to information that would be considered heretical for ordinary citizens to even know exists. They study forbidden texts, learn the true names of demons, understand the weaknesses of Xenos species. This knowledge is both power and burden, for to know these things is to be forever changed, to understand the true depths of the darkness that threatens humanity. An Inquisitor's retinue reflects this need for diverse expertise. They might include veteran warriors like stormtroopers or former military officers, tech priests who can interface with ancient technology, psychers who serve as advisors or weapons, medici to treat injuries and analyze biological threats. It even sanctioned Xenos on occasion for those radical enough to employ them. The retinue becomes the Inquisitor's family, trusted companions who share the burden of their terrible work. The philosophical divides within the Inquisition add another layer of complexity. Puritans believe in adhering strictly to imperial doctrine, refusing to use any tainted tools or forbidden knowledge in their work. Radicals are willing to employ any means necessary to achieve their goals, including captured Xenos technology, bound demons, or alliance with aliens. These divisions can lead to bitter conflicts, with Inquisitors sometimes declaring their fellows excommunicate traitors and hunting them as they would any other enemy of the Imperium. With all this power, all this training, all these resources, an Inquisitor might seem invincible. They have toppled governments, destroyed worlds, defeated demon princes and Xenos warlords. They are legends in their own lifetimes, figures of myth and terror whose very presence can cause populations to kneel in fear or hope, depending on their judgment. And yet, for all their might, for all their authority, Inquisitors remain human. They can be surprised, they can be overwhelmed, they can make mistakes. And when those mistakes lead them into the hands of the Orks, all their power and prestige cannot save them. The seal that commands billions means nothing to creatures who value only strength and the promise of a good fight. The equipment that made them formidable becomes target for looting. The knowledge that was their greatest weapon is useless against enemies who neither know nor care about imperial authority, demonic corruption, or any of the sophisticated threats the Inquisitor has spent their life studying. In Ork captivity, an Inquisitor is stripped of everything that made them powerful in imperial society. They cannot requisition aid. They cannot command obedience. They cannot rely on their reputation or their title. They are alone, truly alone, with only their core training, their faith, and their will to survive to sustain them. It is the ultimate test of what it means to be an Inquisitor, to be stripped of all external power and forced to rely solely on one's inner strength. The nature of the Orks. To understand what an Inquisitor faces when captured by Orks, one must first understand what the Orks truly are. They are not merely brutish aliens, though they are certainly that. They are not just savage warriors, though they excel at violence. Yet the Orks represent something far more fundamental and far more dangerous. They are a species that exists in perfect harmony with its nature, wanting nothing more than what they already have, seeking nothing beyond eternal war. The Orks are a biological marvel, though the term seems almost laughable when applied to such crude creatures. They are not born in the conventional sense, but rather grow from spores released by other Orks throughout their lives, and especially upon death. These spores develop in the ground, eventually sprouting into the various subspecies of the Orkoid ecosystem. First come the tiny snotlings, barely intelligent and used primarily as laborers in fungus farms. Then the Gretchen emerge, small, cunning creatures who serve as slaves and servants to their larger cousins. Finally, as the Orks themselves push up from the soil, already possessing instinctive knowledge of language, warfare, and their place in greenskin society. This spore-based reproduction makes the Orks incredibly difficult to eradicate. A single Ork killed in battle releases spores that can lie dormant for years before sprouting. A planet cleared of Ork presence might seem safe, only to face a new green tide a generation later as dormant spores finally germinate. The only way to truly cleanse a world of Ork contamination is through extensive chemical treatment, or, in extreme cases, exterminatus. Even then, some spores might survive. The Orkoid physiology is equally remarkable. Their bodies are a symbiotic combination of animal and fungal tissue, with the fungal elements providing incredible resilience and regenerative capabilities. An Ork can survive wounds that would kill a human instantly, fighting on with missing limbs, ruptured organs, even partially severed heads. Their pain tolerance is extraordinary. They feel pain, but simply do not care about it in the way other species do. To an Ork, pain is just another sensation of being alive, no more concerning than hunger or fatigue. They grow throughout their lives, with size directly correlating to success in battle. The more an Ork fights, the bigger they become. The bigger they are, the more authority they command over other Orks, who instinctively follow the largest and strongest among them. This creates a natural hierarchy based purely on physical dominance. The biggest Ork becomes the war boss, commanding hordes of lesser Orks through a combination of size, strength, and the simple fact that he can beat up anyone who questions his authority. Beneath the war boss stand the nobs, larger and more successful Orks who serve as lieutenants and commanders. They lead mobs of boys, the regular Ork warriors, who make up the bulk of any green tide. Even among the boys, constant fighting establishes a pecking order, with the stronger, more successful Orks naturally taking leadership roles, while weaker ones follow or get beaten into submission. Interspersed throughout this hierarchy are the odd boys, Orks, who possess specialized instinctive knowledge. Mech boys understand technology in a way that seems almost supernatural, able to build vehicles and weapons from scrap that by all rights should not function, but somehow do. Pain boys serve as surgeons and medics, though their methods are crude and their bedside manner non-existent. Weird boys are psychers who channel the collective psychic energy of other orcs, a dangerous role that often results in their heads exploding. Runthards manage the Gretchen slaves, keeping them in line and making sure they perform their duties. Orc society revolves entirely around warfare. They do not farm or manufacture in the traditional sense. Their fungal biology provides food, and captured slaves or Gretchen handle most labor. An orc's time is spent preparing for the next fight, reminiscing about past fights, or actually fighting. When no external enemies are available, they fight each other for entertainment and to establish dominance. This is not seen as problematic. It is simply how things are. Violence is not something orcs engage in reluctantly as a necessary evil. Violence is their joy, their purpose, their reason for existence. The various orc clans represent different philosophies of warfare, though philosophy might be too grand a word for these cultural groupings. The Goths favor close combat and worship strength above all. The Bad Moons are the richest, their teeth growing faster than other orcs, allowing them to accumulate wealth that they spend on flashy weapons and armor. The Evil Sons are speed freaks, obsessed with vehicles and going fast. The Blood Axes have learned tactics from fighting humans and are looked down upon as cowardly for sometimes retreating or using strategy. The Death Skulls are kleptomaniacs, believing that blue is lucky and looting everything not nailed down. The Snakebites reject technology, preferring to fight with primitive weapons and ride into battle on squigs. But regardless of clan, all orcs share certain characteristics. They are innately aggressive, seeing every interaction as potential combat. They value strength and success in battle above all else. They have no concept of fear as other species understand it. An orc might be cautious of something demonstrably more dangerous, but they will never be terrified or demoralized in the way human soldiers might be. Retreat is not surrender or admission of defeat, but simply a tactical decision to come back later for another go. As the orc saying goes, if they win, they win. If they die fighting so it doesn't count. If they run away, they can come back for another try, so they haven't lost. The orc gestalt psychic field is perhaps their most bizarre trait. And orcs generate a low-level psychic field that makes their technology work through sheer belief. Red vehicles go faster because orcs believe red things are faster. Guns fire because orcs believe they will fire. Impossible machines function because enough orcs believe they should function. This is not unlimited. The technology must be at least vaguely plausible, and the psychic field only provides that extra push to make the barely functional actually work. But it means that orc technology, which would be useless scrap in anyone else's hands, becomes deadly weaponry when wielded by greenskins. Their language is crude but expressive, full of violence and directness. Orcs have no use for subtlety or diplomacy. They say exactly what they mean, usually at high volume. Their culture has no art in the traditional sense, though they do have music. Or as if the term can be applied to the cacophony of engines, gunfire, and shouted chants that orcs consider entertainment. They have no written history, relying instead on oral tradition and the vague genetic memory that seems to inform all orcoid behavior. To the orcs, other species are categorized simply by how good a fight they provide. Humans are humies, numerous, and sometimes entertaining to fight. The Space Marines are beakies, or Space Marines, recognized as particularly tough opponents worth seeking out. The Eldar are pansies, fast and tricky, but too fragile. The Tau are fish heads, with shooty weapons, but not tough enough in close combat. Each species is evaluated purely on their combat effectiveness and the entertainment value of fighting them. This is what makes orcs such terrifying captors. Yet they have no concept of prisoner rights, no understanding of mercy or compassion, no respect for rank or status. To an orc, a captured Inquisitor is just another humie, perhaps slightly more interesting than usual, because of their fancy armor and weapons, but fundamentally just another piece of loot. The Ork cannot be reasoned with in the way one might reason with a human captor. They cannot be bribed or threatened in conventional ways. They operate on a level of pure, instinctive aggression that makes them almost impossible to manipulate or predict. And yet, paradoxically, this simplicity also creates opportunities. Orks are not subtle. They are not paranoid or suspicious by nature. If something seems straightforward to them, they accept it at face value. And they do not torture for information, because the concept of extracting intelligence through pain is too sophisticated for them. They might beat a prisoner to make them work harder or for entertainment. But systematic interrogation is beyond their interest or capability. They are easily distracted by the promise of a good fight or the appearance of something interesting. Their attention spans are short, and their priorities can shift in an instant if something more exciting presents itself. For a captured Inquisitor, understanding these traits becomes crucial for survival. The Orks are not an evil that can be opposed through faith and righteousness, like chaos. They are not a calculated threat that can be analyzed and defeated through superior tactics, like the Eldar. They are a force of nature, brutal and straightforward. That must be endured and outlasted rather than directly confronted. The Inquisitor must adapt to a completely alien form of threat, one their training may have prepared them for intellectually, but not experientially. The capture. How it happens. The circumstances that lead to an Inquisitor falling into Ork hands are as varied as the Inquisitors themselves. Each scenario represents a moment where something went catastrophically wrong, where the Inquisitor's plans, authority, and preparations proved insufficient against the chaotic brutality of the greenskin menace. Perhaps the most straightforward scenario is overwhelming force. The Inquisitor, investigating reports of Ork activity in a region, finds themselves facing a tide far larger than intelligence suggested. What was supposed to be a small warband proves to be the advance elements of a massive offensive. The Inquisitor's retinue, perhaps a squad of stormtroopers and a few specialists, suddenly faces thousands of charging Orks. In the chaos of battle, separated from their allies, wounded and disoriented, the Inquisitor is dragged down by sheer numbers. They fight with all their skill and equipment, dropping dozens of greenskins, but there are always more. A power fist catches them across the temple. Darkness swallows consciousness. They wake later, bound and stripped of their gear, to the raucous laughter of Orks celebrating their capture. Other captures happen through ambush. The Inquisitor, investigating Ork activity, walks into a trap they failed to detect. Perhaps they trusted intelligence that was weeks old, yet not accounting for how quickly Ork forces can move and redeploy. Perhaps they underestimated the cunning of a Blood Axe's warboss, who actually used strategy and deception. The building they entered for investigation suddenly fills with Orks emerging from concealed positions. The explosion that should have cleared an escape route fails because Ork construction is too ramshackle to follow predictable structural weaknesses. Before they can react, they are surrounded, outnumbered 50-1. Even an Inquisitor's formidable skills have limits. Some captures occur through betrayal. The Inquisitor is working with local Imperial forces, perhaps a planetary defense force, or an Astra Militarum regiment, coordinating resistance against an Ork invasion. Unknown to them, some among their temporary allies have already been compromised. Yes, not by chaos, but by simple cowardice or self-interest. When the Orks attack in overwhelming force, these traitors ensure the Inquisitor is separated from reliable support, left in a position where capture becomes inevitable. Or perhaps there is no deliberate betrayal, merely incompetence, a commander who panics and orders retreat, without ensuring the Inquisitor's safety, leaving them stranded as Ork forces overrun their position. Technical failure creates another pathway to capture. The Inquisitor's shuttle or transport, critical for evacuation from a combat zone, is damaged by Ork fire. It crashes in territory controlled by greenskins. The Inquisitor survives, but is injured, their equipment damaged or lost in the crash. Before they can call for extraction, Ork scavengers arrive to loot the wreck. The Inquisitor fights, but is weakened by injury and lack of resources. They are eventually overwhelmed and taken. Mission-specific scenarios add complexity. An Inquisitor infiltrating an Ork-held world to gather intelligence or sabotage their war effort might have their cover blown. Perhaps their disguise fails, or they are recognized by an Ork who has fought humans before and learned to spot imposters. Perhaps they trigger an alarm system they did not know existed, one of the rare pieces of Ork technology that actually works as intended. Suddenly hunted by every Ork in the vicinity, unable to reach their extraction point, they are run to ground and captured. There are scenarios involving natural disasters or environmental hazards. The Inquisitor is on a world where their investigation is interrupted by seismic activity, a volcanic eruption, or other catastrophe. In the chaos of evacuation, they are separated from their retinue. Orks, attracted by the disaster and the potential for looting, arrive in force. The Inquisitor, struggling with environmental hazards and injured survivors, cannot mount an effective defense when the greenskins attack. Some captures happen in space. The Inquisitor's ship is boarded by Ork raiders. Perhaps the vessel was already damaged in battle, its shields failing, its weapon batteries depleted. The Orks smash through the hull in assault boats, their crude but effective boarding torpedoes punching into critical areas. The crew fights desperately, but Orks excel at boarding actions, their strength and numbers overwhelming defensive positions. The Inquisitor, leading the defense from the bridge or attempting to reach critical systems, finds themselves cut off by the invaders. Without a retinue or in the confusion of ship-to-ship combat, even an Inquisitor can be overwhelmed. Psychic scenarios offer their own perils. An Inquisitor who is a psyker might find their powers failing at a critical moment. Perhaps the area they are fighting in has been subject to weird boy activity, the chaotic psychic emanations of Ork psykers disrupting their own abilities. Perhaps they have pushed their powers too far and risk demonic possession if they continue, forcing them to rely solely on physical capabilities against enemies who excel at physical violence. Without their psychic edge, the Inquisitor becomes far more vulnerable. In each of these scenarios, the moment of actual capture follows a similar pattern. The Inquisitor fights until they simply cannot anymore, exhausted, injured, overwhelmed by numbers or circumstance. There might be a final blow that sends them into unconsciousness, a power claw swipe that cracks their armor and breaks ribs, or simply the weight of a dozen Orks piling on and dragging them down.
You know, writing this script really made me think about how terrifying this scenario actually is. We often focus on the big threats in Warhammer 40K, chaos, corruption, tyrant conception, dark Eldar, but there's something uniquely horrifying about the Orks and complete indifference. They're not trying to break you spiritually or turn you into that darkness. They just don't care. You're a thing to them, like a tool or a piece of scrap metal. And honestly, that might be worse than malice. An Inquisitor spends their entire life wielding absolute authority, and then suddenly they're just another slave in a cage. It's that reversal, that complete stripping away of identity, that makes this so disturbing. But yeah, let's continue with what happens.
The last thing they might see before darkness takes them is green faces laughing, massive hands tearing away their equipment, and the knowledge that everything has gone catastrophically wrong. The immediate aftermath of capture is disorienting. The Inquisitor wakes, and the first thing they notice is pain. Their head throbs from concussion. Their body aches from wounds and rough handling. Their armor is gone, stripped away by eager Ork looters. Their weapons are missing. Their inquisitorial seal, that symbol of ultimate authority, is nowhere to be found. They are bound, ropes or chains securing their limbs in a way that allows minimal movement. The bindings are crude but effective, the kind of restraints used for prisoners or slaves, nothing sophisticated but adequate for keeping a human immobilized. The second thing they notice is the noise. Orks are never quiet, but being in the middle of their camp or stronghold is overwhelming to human senses. Engines roar constantly, metal clangs against metal. Orks shout at each other in their guttural language, arguing, boasting, or simply making noise for its own sake. Somewhere in the distance, gunfire rattles as orcs test weapons or just fire them for fun. The cacophony is relentless, a wall of sound that makes it difficult to think clearly. The third thing is the smell. Orc territory reeks in ways that assault human senses. There is the fungal odor of orcoid biology, sharp and pervasive. Engine oil and exhaust fumes mix with the smell of blood and less identifiable substances. Waste, both orc and from their various slaves and animals, adds to the stench. For someone accustomed to the clean, filtered air of starships or imperial facilities, the assault on the olfactory senses is nearly as bad as the physical injuries. As consciousness fully returns, the Inquisitor's training begins to assert itself. Assess the situation, identify threats and opportunities, maintain psychological stability. But this training was developed for interrogation by human enemies or even chaos cultists. Nothing quite prepares someone for the sheer alien nature of orc captivity. Or the Inquisitor must adapt quickly, or risk being overwhelmed by the bizarre horror of their circumstances. The realization of what has happened hits with terrible clarity. They have been captured. Not killed, which might have been easier, but captured. They are now in the hands of the Orks, creatures who see them as nothing more than a curiosity or a potential source of amusement. Everything they were, everything they commanded, all their authority and power means nothing here. They are alone, stripped of everything that made them formidable in imperial society, reduced to simple survival against enemies who have no concept of mercy or proper treatment of prisoners. The psychological impact of this realization varies by individual. Some Inquisitors might feel terror for the first time in years, as stripped of the confidence their authority usually provides. Others might retreat into cold calculation, viewing their situation as merely another problem to solve. Many experience a moment of dissociation, unable to fully process the reversal of their circumstances. But all must eventually face the same truth. They have been captured by orcs, and their ordeal has only just begun. First encounters with captors. The initial hours and days after an Inquisitor's capture by orcs are crucial for establishing the patterns that will define their captivity. These first encounters with their greenskin captors set the tone for what comes next, and the Inquisitor must navigate a situation completely unlike anything in their training or experience. The first orc the Inquisitor sees properly conscious might be a knob or boss checking on the new loot. To human eyes, even a regular orc is imposing, 7 or 8 feet of muscle and green skin, with tusks protruding from a broad jaw and small red eyes that gleam with an unsettling mixture of intelligence and savagery. But a knob or boss is significantly larger, sometimes approaching 9 or 10 feet tall, broader than any human, covered in scars from countless battles and decorated with trophies taken from defeated enemies. This orc approaches with a curiosity that is almost childlike in its directness. They lean down, studying the captured human with the same interest a child might show toward an interesting insect. The Inquisitor might see their own equipment being worn or carried by the orc, or a bolt pistol hanging from a belt that also holds choppers and grenades, their power sword being examined by massive green hands that seem too crude to properly wield such a weapon, yet somehow manage. The Inquisitor's armor might be repurposed into shoulder guards for the orc, ceramite plates that once protected a holy warrior, now serving as crude decoration for a Xenos creature. The orc might speak, their voice a guttural rumble that turns gothic into something barely recognizable. "This one's awake, boss!" they might bellow to someone out of sight. Or perhaps they address the prisoner directly. "You's a Hume boss, yeah? Got shiny bits and everything." The grammar is broken, the pronunciation rough, but the meaning is clear. This orc has fought humans before and recognizes that their captive is somehow important, even if they don't fully understand the concept of an Inquisitor. If the war boss, or a particularly high-ranking knob visits, the Inquisitor gets their first true sense of the hierarchy they've fallen into. The war boss is a creature of nightmares, massive beyond any normal orc, covered in scars and trophies from decades or centuries of warfare. They might wear a crude crown made from the skull of some defeated enemy. They certainly wear the best equipment available, looted from countless battles and modified by their mech boys into something functional, if not beautiful. The war boss looks at the Inquisitor with eyes that hold more intelligence than most humans would credit to an orc. They might prod the prisoner with a finger thick as a broom handle, testing for reaction. But they might ask questions. Use the boss of the humies? Or, where's more of you? The questions are simple, direct, and delivered with no real expectation of useful answers. Orcs don't torture for information in the systematic way the Inquisition might. If they want to know something and the prisoner doesn't answer, they might beat them. But it's more for emphasis than as actual interrogation technique. The linguistic barrier creates a strange dynamic. Many orcs speak at least some Gothic, picked up from fighting humans and listening to captured slaves. Their pronunciation is terrible and their grammar non-existent, but basic communication is usually possible. However, orcish concepts don't always translate well to human thinking. When an orc asks, "Are you going to be good for a scrap?" they might be asking if the prisoner will provide entertainment through forced gladiatorial combat, or they might be evaluating whether the human would be worth keeping alive as labor. The ambiguity is terrifying. The Inquisitor might attempt to assert authority, declaring their rank and demanding release. This is usually met with laughter. The orcs find the concept hilarious. "Use not the boss here, Humie," one might bellow, slapping the prisoner hard enough to send them sprawling. "The boss is the boss, and you's just a prisoner." The casual violence reinforces the complete reversal of the Inquisitor's circumstances. Words that would make Imperial officials tremble mean nothing to creatures who respect only strength. The physical treatment during these first encounters sets precedents. What the orcs are rough, but not necessarily cruel in the way chaos cultists might be. They might drag the prisoner around by their chains, not out of malice, but simply because they are strong and the human is weak. They might throw the captive into a cage or cell without much care, resulting in injuries from the impact. They might forget to provide food or water for days, not from deliberate starvation, but simply because feeding prisoners is not something that occurs to them as necessary until the human starts looking really weak. Other prisoners, if there are any, provide context. The Inquisitor might find themselves thrown into a crude cage with other captives, Imperial guardsmen who survive battles, civilian slaves taken from conquered worlds, perhaps even the occasional Space Marine scout or unfortunate tech priest. These other prisoners' conditions tell a story. Some have been here for weeks or months, reduced to hollow-eyed wretches who jump at every loud noise. Others are newer, still possessing some fight and hope. All bear the marks of orc captivity, bruises, malnutrition, and a haunted look that comes from existing at the mercy of creatures who have no concept of mercy. Through conversations with other prisoners, the Inquisitor begins to understand their situation. The orcs keep captives primarily for labor. Humans are weaker than Gretchen, but more intelligent, capable of tasks requiring fine motor control or basic problem solving. Prisoners are put to work in workshops, assembling ammunition or performing maintenance on vehicles. They haul materials for construction projects. They serve as test subjects when mech boys or pain boys want to experiment with new technology or techniques. And sometimes they provide entertainment, forced to fight in crude arenas for the amusement of orc mobs who bet on the outcomes. The concept of escape immediately occurs to any Inquisitor. They are trained in infiltration, evasion, and survival. Surely there must be ways to exploit the orcs' obvious lack of sophistication. But other prisoners quickly disabuse them of this notion. The orcs are careless, yes, but their strength and numbers make up for it. The camp or stronghold is always full of orcs. Even at night, there are hundreds awake and active. The perimeter is patrolled not by disciplined sentries, but by speed freaks racing their vehicles around the borders. In any movement in the dark, inviting a hail of gunfire from orcs who shoot at anything for fun. Even if one could somehow escape the immediate area, where would they go? Orc-controlled territory extends for miles in every direction. The Inquisitor has no equipment, no supplies, no knowledge of the local geography. They are wounded, exhausted, and surrounded by enemies. the grim reality sets in. Escape will not be simple or immediate. If it is even possible, it will require careful planning, patience, and a degree of luck that seems increasingly unlikely. The Orks' treatment of their prisoner fluctuates with their mood and current activities. If the warband is preparing for a raid or battle, the prisoners might be completely ignored for days, left in their cages with minimal food while the Orks focus on their upcoming fight. And if the battle goes well and the Orks return victorious, they are in high spirits, which means they might drag prisoners out to show off or to participate in celebrations that usually involve violence. If the battle goes poorly, the Orks are angry and frustrated, looking for something to take their aggression out on, which often means rough treatment for anyone available. The Inquisitor must learn to read these mood shifts to survive. When the Orks are distracted, it is safer, but also means being forgotten entirely, possibly without food or water. When they are paying attention, the Inquisitor risks being selected for whatever the Orks have in mind, whether that is forced labor, entertainment, or becoming the subject of some mech boy's latest idea. There is no safe time, no period of security. Every moment is a negotiation with chaos, as trying to be valuable enough to keep alive, but not interesting enough to suffer special attention. The psychological impact of these first encounters cannot be overstated. For someone who has spent their life commanding respect and obedience, being reduced to an object of casual amusement for alien brutes is devastating. The Inquisitor's faith is tested not by grand temptations of chaos, but by simple, grinding helplessness. They pray to the Emperor for strength, for deliverance, for any sign that their service has not ended in such an ignoble way. But the Emperor seems very distant when surrounded by laughing Orks, who see them as nothing more than another piece of loot to be used until it breaks. The Ork stronghold. Understanding the environment of the Inquisitor's captivity is crucial to comprehending their experience. An Ork stronghold is unlike any Imperial facility, any Chaos fortress, or any Xenos installation one might imagine. It is barely organized chaos given physical form, a testament to Ork society's priorities and their unique approach to everything from architecture to waste disposal. The stronghold itself might be built in the ruins of an Imperial city, Ork structures rising from the wreckage of human civilization, like fungus from a corpse. Towering scrap metal constructions lean at angles that should cause them to collapse, held together by crude welds, random rivets, and the Ork's subconscious psychic field that makes impossible structures somehow function. Walls might be constructed from crashed vehicles, shipping containers, or even pieces of downed spacecraft, stacked and bolted together with no regard for aesthetics or proper engineering principles. Or perhaps the stronghold occupies a natural formation, a canyon turned into a fortress, a cave system expanded by explosives and Ork labor, a forest cleared and filled with ramshackle buildings. The Orks adapt to any environment, caring nothing for comfort, but wanting proximity to resources and defensive positions that let them fight off attackers. Every stronghold reflects its war boss's personality and the clan's preferences. A Bad Moon stronghold might be relatively prosperous, with better equipment and more elaborate decorations. A Goth stronghold would be grimmer, focused on strength and combat readiness above all else. A Speed Freak stronghold would feature racing tracks and vehicle workshops dominating the space. Whilst the noise is constant and overwhelming, engines run at all hours as mech boys work on vehicles or Orks test their rides. Forges clang as weapons are hammered into shape. Gunfire echoes as Orks test their shooters or simply fire them because shooting is fun. Orks shout at each other continuously, their voices carrying across the stronghold in a never-ending roar of communication, argument, and boasting. At night, the noise might diminish slightly, but it never stops. Orks who are not fighting or preparing for fights are drinking fungus beer, racing their vehicles, or beating each other up for entertainment. All of these activities are loud. The smell is equally pervasive. Fungal growth carpets much of the stronghold, the Ork ecosystem asserting itself wherever greenskins settle. This provides food and other resources, but also contributes to the distinctive odor that marks Ork territory. Engine exhaust from countless vehicles fills the air with choking fumes. Blood, both orc and otherwise, stains the ground from constant fighting and the messy work of pain boys. Waste piles accumulate in corners, as orcs have no concept of sanitation and simply throw refuse wherever is convenient. The prisoner cages or pens exist somewhere in this chaos, usually near work areas where captives will be deployed. The cages are crude constructions of metal bars or chain-link fencing, barely tall enough for humans to stand in, with no protection from the elements. Multiple prisoners might be crammed into spaces far too small, forced into constant close contact. The floor might be bare earth, or covered in mud during rain and dust during dry weather. There is no privacy, no comfort, nothing even resembling humane conditions. The cages are simply holding pens for living tools to be used when needed. Food, when it comes, is barely adequate. The orcs throw in fungal cakes, the same food Gretchen eat, or occasionally scraps from their own meals if they remember. The fungus is nutritious enough to sustain life, but tastes vile to human palates. Water is unpredictable, sometimes provided in barrels that multiple prisoners must share, sometimes forgotten for days. The guards, if they can be called that, are usually young orcs, or particularly stupid ones assigned to watch the prisoners more as punishment than responsibility. They might forget their charges entirely, leaving prisoners without food or water until someone remembers and is bothered to do something about it. The workshops where prisoners labor are scenes of organized chaos. Mech boys direct Gretchen and human slaves in assembling ammunition, maintaining vehicles, or constructing whatever the war boss has ordered. The environment is incredibly dangerous. Heavy machinery operates without safety guards. Explosives are stored carelessly. Chemical fumes fill the air from welding and other processes. Injuries are common. Crushed fingers from dropped metal, burns from mishandled equipment, chemical exposure from various substances. A pain boy might be available to treat seriously injured orcs, but prisoners who get hurt are usually left to heal on their own or die from their wounds. Other areas of the stronghold present their own hazards. The fighting pits where orcs settle disputes or entertain themselves with gladiatorial combat are stained with blood and littered with the remains of previous combatants. The mech boys' workshops are filled with half-finished projects that might explode or activate unexpectedly. The pain boys' medical areas are chambers of horror where crude surgeries are performed on conscious patients and experiments are conducted with no consideration for the subject's well-being. Throughout the stronghold, violence erupts spontaneously and constantly. Orcs fight each other over status, over insults real or imagined, or simply because they are bored and hitting someone sounds fun. These brawls range from brief scuffles to full-scale melees involving dozens of combatants. Prisoners caught in these eruptions risk being trampled or struck by stray blows. The safest response is to huddle against a wall and try to avoid notice, but sometimes even that is not enough. The stronghold's population is diverse in its own way. Beyond the orcs themselves, there are thousands of Gretchen scurrying about on various errands, their high-pitched voices adding to the cacophony. Snotlings tend the fungus farms, their presence barely registered by the larger inhabitants. Slaves from numerous species might be present, humans most commonly, but occasionally Tau auxiliaries, even Aeldari in rare cases. Each group of captives exists in its own pocket of misery, rarely interacting with the others, except when work assignments bring them together. The day-night cycle in the stronghold follows orc activity patterns more than any natural rhythm. Orcs do not require much sleep and can function for days without rest. But they do eventually need to kip, as they call it, collapsing into unconsciousness for a few hours before rising refreshed. However, with so many orcs present, there is always someone awake and active. The stronghold never truly sleeps. It merely has periods of slightly reduced activity. For the Inquisitor, this environment is a form of torture in itself. They are accustomed to order, to hierarchy, to the careful organization of imperial systems. Here, there is only chaos, noise, filth, and casual violence. Every sense is constantly assaulted. Sleep is difficult or impossible with the noise and the constant fear of being suddenly dragged out for some unknown purpose. Food is inadequate. Water is scarce. Medical care is non-existent. The body begins to deteriorate from malnutrition, stress, and lack of proper rest. But physical conditions, terrible as they are, pale compared to the psychological impact of existing in such an environment. The Inquisitor is surrounded by aliens who see them as nothing more than a thing to be used. Every moment carries the potential for sudden violence. There is no predictability, no routine that could provide even minimal psychological security. The days blur together in a haze of fear, exhaustion, and grim determination to survive another day. Yet within this nightmare, the Inquisitor must find ways to adapt. They must learn the rhythms of the stronghold, when to keep their head down, when it might be safe to rest, where the worst dangers lurk. They must establish relationships with other prisoners, building what solidarity is possible among the damned. They must maintain their mental discipline, holding on to their sense of self and their faith in the Emperor, even when everything around them suggests that they have been abandoned to their fate. The stronghold is not a prison in the conventional sense. It is an ecosystem, an alien environment where humans are prey and resource, where survival requires constant vigilance and a willingness to endure horrors that would break lesser souls. For an Inquisitor, accustomed to being the most dangerous person in any room, to being the one who judges others, this reversal is perhaps the cruelest aspect of their captivity. They are no longer the hunter, but the hunted, no longer the judge, but the condemned, existing at the sufferance of creatures who barely acknowledge their sentience. The mech boys and pain boys. Among all the orcs in the stronghold, none represent a greater threat to the Inquisitor's well-being than the odd boys, specifically the mech boys and pain boys. These specialists possess instinctive knowledge in their fields, making them curious about anything new or unusual. A captured Inquisitor, with their augmetics, their high-quality equipment, and their unusual physiology compared to common Imperial civilians, represents a fascinating subject for their attention. And orc curiosity is a dangerous thing for anyone on the receiving end. The mech boys are the first to take interest in the Inquisitor's equipment. These orcs possess an innate understanding of technology that manifests without training or education. They simply know how things work, or at least they think they do, which combined with the orc psychic field often amounts to the same thing. When the Inquisitor's gear is brought to the mech boys for evaluation, it becomes a source of endless fascination. A mech boy might spend hours examining a digital weapon, trying to understand how something so small produces such destructive force. They poke at circuitry with tools that would make a tech priest weep, pulling components apart to see what they do. Sometimes they might even get it working in a fashion, usually by incorporating it into some larger construction. Other times they simply break it beyond repair and toss it aside to move on to the next interesting piece of loot. The Inquisitor's armor receives particular attention. Power armor or advanced carapace armor represents technology beyond what most orcs encounter from common Imperial guardsmen. The mech boy sees the servo motors, the power cells, the integrated systems, and immediately wants to know how it all works. They might disassemble pieces of it, hammer components into new shapes, or try to incorporate elements into their own creations. An Inquisitor might later see parts of their armor serving as plating on an orc's mega armor, or as components in some incomprehensible machine. But equipment can be replaced. The real danger comes when the mech boy's curiosity extends to the Inquisitor themselves. Many Inquisitors have augmetics, bionic limbs, enhanced organs, neural interfaces, cranial ports for data access. To a mech boy, these represent the ultimate curiosity, technology integrated with living flesh. They want to see how it works. They want to know if it can be removed and used elsewhere. They want to understand the principles so they can apply them to orcs or their own creations. This leads to the mech boy bringing the Inquisitor to their workshop, a place of smoke, sparks, and impossible machinery. The Inquisitor is restrained on a crude table or bench, their augmetics exposed. The mech boy prods at them with various tools, wrenches, power drills, cutting torches. They might try to interface with cranial ports using jury-rigged cables, sending random electrical pulses through the Inquisitor's nervous system. They might attempt to remove a bionic limb to see how it attaches, causing agony as connections are severed. They might simply poke and prod with the curiosity of a child dissecting an insect, entirely oblivious to the pain they are causing. The mercy, if it can be called that, is that mech boys have short attention spans. If something does not immediately prove interesting or useful, they lose interest and move on to the next project. An Inquisitor who can endure the initial examination might be returned to the cages, damaged but alive. The alternative is becoming a long-term project, incorporated into some mad construction the mech boy is building, which usually ends fatally for the subject. If the mech boys represent threat through curiosity and technological interest, the pain boys represent something worse: medical experimentation combined with Ork enthusiasm and complete lack of ethical constraints. Pain boys are the mad docs of Ork society, possessing instinctive knowledge of anatomy and surgery, but no concept of patient care, anesthesia, or appropriate medical practice. A pain boy examines a captured Inquisitor with the same interest a human surgeon might show in a fascinating new disease. I'd accept without any of the professional detachment or ethical considerations. They want to see how human anatomy differs from Ork anatomy. They want to test their latest medical theories. They want to see if techniques that work on Orks can be applied to humans. And they are perfectly willing to experiment on conscious subjects because, in their view, if the patient is screaming, at least you know they are still alive. The Pain Boys' workshop is a chamber of horrors that would traumatize even hardened Imperial Guard medics. Crude surgical implements hang from racks: saws, drills, clamps, and devices whose purpose is unclear, but whose function appears painful. Blood stains every surface. Body parts, both Ork and otherwise, are scattered about, leftovers from previous surgeries or experiments. The Pain Boy itself wears a filthy apron and carries a collection of tools that might be medical instruments or might be weapons. With Orks, the distinction is often unclear. When the Pain Boy takes interest in the Inquisitor, the experience is nightmarish. They might decide to test how much damage a human can sustain before dying, inflicting injuries that would be immediately fatal to lesser individuals, but that an Inquisitor's augmented physiology can survive. They might attempt to attach Ork bionics to the human, trying to see if their crude cybernetics can interface with human neural systems. They might conduct vivisection on a conscious subject, cutting open the Inquisitor to examine internal organs while providing a running commentary on their observations. The Pain Boy might attempt to harvest the Inquisitor's augmetics, seeing them as valuable components that could be used on Ork patients. An augmetic eye is removed with little care for the surrounding tissue. A reinforced spine is examined for the engineering principles behind it. Enhanced organs are prodded and poked to see how they differ from standard human anatomy. Through all of this, the Pain Boy chatters away in broken Gothic, explaining what they are doing as if the Inquisitor is a student rather than a victim. Some Pain Boys take interest in the concept of Space Marine gene seed and similar biological enhancements, having heard of these things from captured humans or observed differences in Space Marine physiology. An Inquisitor, while not possessing gene seed, might have other biological enhancements from their training and augmentation. The Pain Boy wants to understand these enhancements and see if they can be replicated for Orks. This leads to experiments involving tissue samples, blood analysis performed with Ork science, and attempts to graft enhanced tissue onto Ork subjects to see if it takes. The truly horrifying aspect is that the Pain Boy means no malice. They are not torturing the Inquisitor in the way a dark Eldar would, savoring the suffering for its own sake. They are simply conducting their experiments with the enthusiasm of a child playing with a new toy. The fact that their subject is conscious and in agony is simply a minor inconvenience, barely worth noting. When they finally finish, they might patch up the worst of the damage with crude stitching and send the Inquisitor back to the cages, Or they might leave them on the table and wander off to work on something else, forgetting entirely about the human they just vivisected. Survival of these encounters requires a will that few possess. The Inquisitor must disassociate from the pain, retreat into mental disciplines taught in their training, but never truly expected to be used in such circumstances. They recite litanies to the Emperor, focusing on the words rather than the sensations of their body being violated. They calculate escape possibilities, force their mind to solve tactical problems instead of acknowledging what is being done to them. They remember their purpose, their mission, their faith, and use these as anchors against the tide of agony. Some Inquisitors do not survive these encounters. The body has limits, even one enhanced by augmetics and training. The mind can break when pushed too far. Those who do survive carry the scars forever. Physical damage that crude Ork medicine cannot properly heal. Psychological trauma from being reduced to a subject for alien experimentation, and the knowledge that they were entirely helpless to prevent what was done to them. But survival, terrible as these experiences are, is possible. The odd boys eventually lose interest or are distracted by other projects. The Inquisitor is returned to the cages, damaged but alive. They have learned something crucial about their captors. The Orks are dangerous not through malice, but through sheer indifference to the suffering of others. And they have proven to themselves that they can endure even the worst horrors and remain fundamentally themselves, their faith intact, their will unbroken. This knowledge becomes crucial for everything that follows. If they can survive the attention of mech boys and pain boys, they can survive anything the Orks throw at them. The ordeal has stripped away any illusions about their situation, any hope that their captors might be reasoned with or manipulated. But it has also revealed their own inner strength, the core of faith and determination that no amount of physical violation can touch. They are still themselves, still an Inquisitor in spirit, if not in authority, still capable of resistance, even if that resistance is merely to survive another day. Daily existence as a prisoner. Beyond the acute horrors of interactions with odd boys, the Inquisitor must navigate the grinding reality of daily existence as an Ork captive. This routine, if such a word can be applied to anything in Ork society, becomes its own form of torture through sheer accumulation of misery and degradation. Each day begins when the Orks decide it begins. There is no schedule, no predictable routine. Sometime in what might be morning, judging by light levels if the Inquisitor is held somewhere with exposure to the outside, Orks arrive to collect prisoners for work detail. The selection process is arbitrary. Whoever is closest to the cage entrance gets pulled out first. The Orks unlock the crude restraints with casual roughness, yanking prisoners to their feet regardless of their condition. Those who move too slowly or cannot stand are beaten until they comply or are left behind. The work assigned varies daily and depends entirely on current Ork needs. One day, as the Inquisitor might be hauling scrap metal for mech boys who are building some new vehicle or weapon. This means lifting and carrying pieces of metal that are often too heavy for human strength, struggling under loads that would require proper equipment in any Imperial facility. The Orks supervising this labor have no concept of human limitations. If a prisoner collapses under a burden, they are kicked or beaten until they get up, or they are dragged aside and a new prisoner takes their place. Another day might involve assembly work in one of the workshops. The Inquisitor finds themselves bolting together ammunition, assembling parts for vehicles, or performing other tasks requiring manual dexterity that Ork fingers are too crude to manage. This work is dangerous in its own way. The equipment is poorly maintained, or likely to pinch or cut careless fingers. The materials themselves might be toxic or corrosive. There is no protective equipment, no safety considerations. Workers who injure themselves badly enough to be useless are simply discarded. Sometimes the work is grimmer. Prisoners might be assigned to clean out fighting pits, removing the remains of previous combat. They might be sent to dispose of waste from Ork habitation areas, a task that combines physical difficulty with nauseating conditions. They might be ordered to perform maintenance on Ork structures, crawling into tight spaces or working at dangerous heights without proper safety equipment. Every task carries risks, and injuries are common. Throughout the workday, the Orks supervising provide a constant environment of casual violence. A prisoner who works too slowly receives a kick or a blow from a club. One who makes a mistake might be beaten more seriously. Those who show fear or weakness invite bullying from young Orks who have not yet grown large enough to challenge their peers and so take their aggression out on weaker targets. The violence is not systematic torture, but rather the ambient violence that permeates all Ork society, now directed at captives who cannot fight back. The other prisoners working alongside the Inquisitor become companions in misery. Some are Imperial Guard veterans, soldiers captured in battle who now serve as slaves. Others are civilians taken from conquered worlds, farmers, factory workers, ordinary people caught in the wrong place when the Orks invaded. A few might be specialists, tech priests who tried to resist and found themselves captured, lower-ranking administratum officials, even occasional naval officers from ships that were boarded. Conversations with fellow prisoners reveal the full scope of their situation. Those who have been captive longest have developed survival strategies, knowing which Orks to avoid, where the slightly safer areas are, how to conserve energy while still working hard enough to avoid beatings. They share what food they can, warn newcomers about particular dangers, and provide what emotional support is possible in such circumstances. These relationships become crucial for psychological survival, reminding the Inquisitor that they are not entirely alone. But these relationships also illustrate the toll captivity takes. The longest-held prisoners are shadows of themselves, their eyes hollow, their bodies wasted from malnutrition and overwork. They speak in whispers, flinching at loud noises. Some have clearly given up any hope of rescue or escape, resigned to working until they die. Others maintain determination through sheer stubbornness or faith in the Emperor, but even they show signs of breaking under the constant stress. Meals, when they occur, are barely adequate. The Orks throw fungal cakes into the cages, usually during evening when work ends. These cakes are the same food fed to Gretchen, nutritious enough to sustain life, but tasting of mold and decay. Each prisoner receives perhaps one or two, never enough to truly satisfy hunger. Water comes in barrels that multiple prisoners must share, or often contaminated with debris or algae, but still precious because dehydration is worse than illness. Some prisoners try to supplement this diet by scavenging. During work details, they might grab scraps of fungus from the floors of growing chambers, or steal food meant for Gretchen when the Orks are not watching. This is risky. Caught stealing, the punishment ranges from beatings to more creative penalties depending on the Ork's mood. But hunger drives people to desperate measures, and the Inquisitor soon finds themselves weighing these risks just like any other prisoner. The return to the cages at day's end brings no real relief. The overcrowding means no privacy, no personal space. The Inquisitor must find what rest they can while pressed against other prisoners, all of them too exhausted to care much about personal boundaries. As sleep is difficult, the noise of the stronghold never truly stops, and the hard ground provides no comfort. Cold or heat, depending on climate and season, make rest uncomfortable. Many prisoners develop health issues from the conditions, respiratory problems from the fumes and fungi, skin conditions from the filth, infections from untreated wounds. Night brings its own terrors. The Orks might decide they want entertainment and drag prisoners out for gladiatorial combat in the fighting pits. Or a mech boy might wake up with an idea and decide they need a subject for immediate experimentation. Or the stronghold might be attacked, with prisoners caught in the crossfire of defending Orks and attacking forces. There is no true safety, no time when the Inquisitor can relax their vigilance completely, as the psychological impact of this routine grinds away at mental health in ways that acute torture might not. It is not any single terrible thing, but rather the accumulation of countless small miseries. The knowledge that this is what life has become and may remain until death the Inquisitor must fight against despair, against the temptation to simply give up and let the end come. They must maintain their identity, their sense of self, their faith in the Emperor, even when everything around them suggests that they have been abandoned. The Inquisitor tries to maintain mental discipline through prayer and meditation. They recite catechisms from their training, finding comfort in familiar words. They review their knowledge of imperial doctrine, reminding themselves of their purpose and their duty. They plan escape scenarios, even if such plans seem impossible, because the act of planning provides purpose and hope. They observe their captors, learning Ork behavior patterns and looking for weaknesses that might be exploited. But there are dark days when these efforts feel futile. Days when the beatings have been particularly severe, when hunger gnaws so badly that thinking clearly becomes difficult, when exhaustion is so complete that even the effort of prayer seems too much. On these days, the Inquisitor must reach deep into reserves they did not know they possessed, finding strength in memories of their training, in their oath of service, in the simple determination to survive out of spite if nothing else. The body deteriorates under these conditions. Muscle wastes from malnutrition and overwork. Wounds heal poorly without proper medical care, sometimes becoming infected. Scars accumulate from beatings and accidents. The Inquisitor, who was once a formidable physical specimen enhanced by augmetics and training, becomes gaunt and weak. They must work constantly to maintain what strength they can, exercising in the limited space of the cage, eating every scrap of food available, forcing their body to continue functioning despite its decline. Fellow prisoners who weaken too much simply disappear. One morning, they are too sick or injured to rise for work detail. The Orks drag them aside, and the other prisoners never see them again. Whether they were killed, died of their injuries, or were taken for some other purpose is unclear. The disappearances serve as grim reminders of what awaits those who cannot maintain minimal functionality. The Inquisitor must stay strong enough to work, is sick enough that they are useless, injured enough that recovery is unlikely. All of these are effectively death sentences in Ork captivity. Yet within this grinding horror, small moments of humanity persist. Prisoners share what little they have. They tell stories to pass the time, reminding each other of the worlds they came from, the lives they led before capture. They support each other when despair threatens to overwhelm. An Imperial Guard veteran might show the Inquisitor which fungi growing in the stronghold are edible versus poisonous. A tech priest might help repair damaged augmetics with scavenged materials. These acts of kindness, tiny as they are, become crucial for psychological survival. The Inquisitor also finds themselves in a new role. Other prisoners recognize them as someone important, is someone with training and knowledge beyond what they possess. They look to the Inquisitor for leadership, for hope, for reassurance that their suffering has meaning. The Inquisitor must balance their own struggle with providing support to others, maintaining morale among the prisoners while fighting their own battles against despair. It is exhausting, but also provides purpose, reminding them that they are still a servant of the Emperor, even in captivity. The Inquisitor's resources and attempts. Despite the overwhelming nature of their captivity, an Inquisitor is not entirely helpless. Their training, their faith, and their sheer determination provide resources that ordinary prisoners lack. The question becomes how to employ these resources in circumstances where traditional methods of resistance or escape are impossible. The Inquisitor's greatest remaining asset is their mind. Unlike their equipment and authority, their knowledge and training cannot be stripped away by Ork looters. They possess understanding of Ork society and behavior from their studies as an Ordo Xenos agent or from general inquisitorial education. They know tactics and strategy, having commanded forces in battle. They understand how to assess situations, identify opportunities, and plan operations even with limited resources. This mental preparation becomes crucial for any attempt at escape or resistance. Physical training also remains valuable. Even weakened by captivity, the Inquisitor retains conditioning that exceeds what most humans possess. They know combat techniques, both armed and unarmed. They understand how to move quietly, how to blend into surroundings, as how to navigate dangerous terrain. Their augmetics, if they possess any, and if those augmetics survive the attention of mech boys, might still function and provide advantages. An augmetic limb might be stronger than flesh. Enhanced senses could detect threats or opportunities others miss. Integrated medical systems might help the body recover from injuries faster than normal. The Inquisitor also possesses something perhaps even more valuable: psychological resilience. They have been trained to resist interrogation, to maintain faith under duress, to function when ordinary people would break. This mental fortitude allows them to observe their captors with cold calculation even while suffering, to plan future actions even when current circumstances seem hopeless, and to maintain their identity as an Inquisitor even when stripped of all external signs of that identity. If the Inquisitor is a psyker, they possess potentially powerful but equally dangerous resources. Psychic powers could provide means of escape or resistance, telepathy to communicate with other prisoners or even nearby Imperial forces, telekinesis to manipulate objects or overcome physical barriers, pyromancy or electrokinesis as weapons. But using psychic powers in Ork territory is extremely risky. The Gestalt Ork psychic field disrupts human psyker abilities, making them unreliable and increasing the danger of warp phenomena. Any significant use of psychic power might attract the attention of weird boys or even demonic entities drawn to the psychic turbulence. The Inquisitor must carefully weigh whether the potential benefits of using their powers outweigh these enormous risks. Hidden resources might still exist despite the Orks' looting. Inquisitors often have contingencies: implanted tracking beacons that signal their location, subcutaneous storage compartments holding emergency supplies, or genetic markers that identify their remains. Some of these might have survived the initial capture and stripping of equipment. A tracking beacon, if still functioning, provides hope that rescue forces are en route, even if weeks or months away. An implanted data core might contain information that could be useful for escape planning if accessed. The Inquisitor also begins to understand their captors' behavior patterns and potential weaknesses. Orks are strong and numerous, but also predictable in their way. But they respond to certain stimuli consistently: the promise of a good fight, interesting technology, or prospects of loot. They are easily distracted, their attention shifting to whatever seems most exciting at the moment. They squabble among themselves constantly, creating opportunities when they are focused on internal disputes rather than prisoner supervision. Escape planning becomes the Inquisitor's focus during whatever time they have for thought. They map the stronghold mentally, noting locations of cages, work areas, armories where captured weapons might be stored, vehicle parks, and potential exits. They observe guard patterns, learning when areas are least supervised. They identify other prisoners who might assist in an escape attempt, warriors from the Imperial Guard, or specialists whose skills would be valuable. They calculate distances to potential extraction points or Imperial territory, considering how far they could travel without equipment or supplies. The most basic escape plans involve simply fleeing during moments of chaos, when the stronghold is attacked, when Orks are distracted by internal fighting, when a major raid leaves the settlement nearly empty. The Inquisitor could break from their cage or work detail and run, hoping to reach the perimeter and beyond before being noticed. This has obvious problems: no equipment, no supplies, no knowledge of the surrounding territory, and the likelihood of being hunted down by Orks who enjoy the chase. But in truly desperate circumstances, even this slim chance might be worth taking. More sophisticated plans require resources and preparation. The Inquisitor might begin to cache supplies, stolen food, scraps of metal that could be sharpened into weapons, pieces of wire that could serve as lockpicks or garrotes. They might cultivate relationships with Gretchen, who have access to areas prisoners cannot reach. trading labor or protection from other orcs in exchange for information or small items. They might identify vehicles that could be stolen and driven if the Inquisitor can bypass whatever crude security the Orks use. Sabotage becomes another form of resistance. The Inquisitor might subtly damage equipment they are forced to work on, ensuring that ammunition fails or vehicles break down at critical moments. They might weaken structural supports in Ork constructions, creating hazards that will manifest later. Now, they might spread discord among the prisoners who collaborate with the Orks, eliminating those who betray their fellows. These acts provide a sense of agency, of fighting back even in captivity, though they must be carefully balanced against the risk of discovery and punishment. The Inquisitor also considers the possibility of sparking a general prisoner revolt. With dozens or hundreds of captives, coordinated action could overwhelm guards in certain areas, seize weapons, and create enough chaos for mass escape. But organizing such a revolt is nearly impossible. The prisoners are from diverse backgrounds and may not trust each other. Communication is difficult under constant Ork supervision, and the failure rate for such attempts is extremely high. The Orks would massacre any revolt with casual efficiency, and the reprisals against survivors would be terrible. Psychological warfare against the Orks proves largely ineffective. Orks cannot be intimidated by threats or demoralized by propaganda. Attempts to sow discord might work on a small scale, encouraging fights between Orks that create opportunities. But Orks fight each other constantly anyway. The best the Inquisitor can do is avoid drawing special attention, blend into the mass of prisoners, and wait for opportunities rather than trying to create them through manipulation. Prayer and faith provide spiritual resources that sustain the Inquisitor even when physical options seem exhausted. They pray for strength to endure another day, for the Emperor's protection over themselves and fellow prisoners, for guidance in their attempts to escape. They recite catechisms taught in their training, finding comfort in the familiar words. They meditate on the nature of duty and service, reminding themselves that even in captivity, they remain an Inquisitor in spirit, still serving the Emperor through their resistance and survival. Some escape attempts are attempted and fail. The Inquisitor might try to flee during a work detail and be quickly recaptured. They might attempt to overpower an Ork guard and be beaten unconscious for their effort. Each failure teaches lessons about what does not work, while also demonstrating to the Orks that their prisoner is dangerous enough to watch more carefully. The Inquisitor must balance their desire to act against the reality that poorly planned attempts waste resources and opportunities, while potentially making their situation worse. The ultimate question becomes, what is the Inquisitor willing to sacrifice for the chance at escape? Are they willing to leave other prisoners behind, abandoning them to certain death or continued captivity? Will they kill collaborators or weak prisoners who might slow down an escape attempt? How much of their humanity and their principles must they compromise to survive? These are questions every Inquisitor hopes never to face, but in Ork captivity, they become unavoidable. Rescue or escape possibilities. The grim reality of Ork captivity does not necessarily mean a permanent fate. There are scenarios, however unlikely, in which the Inquisitor might escape or be rescued. Understanding these possibilities provides hope, however faint, and shapes the Inquisitor's actions while in captivity. Imperial rescue operations, if they occur, typically follow certain patterns. If the Inquisitor had a tracking beacon that survived capture and remains functional, it transmits their location continuously. This signal might be received by Imperial forces, a Navy ship on patrol, a Space Marine battle barge passing through the system, or even the Inquisitor's own retinue if they survived the initial disaster and managed to reach Imperial territory. Once the signal is confirmed and the Inquisitor's identity verified through coded responses, rescue becomes a priority operation. The responding force depends on what is available and how quickly they can deploy. In the best case, a Space Marine strike team could infiltrate the Ork stronghold, eliminate resistance with overwhelming force, and extract the Inquisitor along with any other prisoners who can be saved. Such operations are brutal but effective. The Space Marines smash through Ork defenses, their superior training and equipment making short work of even large numbers of greenskins. They locate the Inquisitor through the tracking signal, fighting their way to the prisoner cages and extracting everyone they can before withdrawing. More commonly, rescue might come from less elite forces. Astra Militarum Special Operations troops, inquisitorial stormtroopers, or even private military contractors hired by the Inquisitor's retinue. These operations are riskier, requiring stealth rather than overwhelming force. The rescue team infiltrates the stronghold under cover of night or during Ork deployment for raids. They locate the Inquisitor, break them out of captivity, and extract through predetermined routes while avoiding detection as long as possible. Success depends on timing, intelligence, and significant luck. Naval operations provide another rescue possibility. If the Ork stronghold is located somewhere accessible to orbital bombardment, Imperial Navy vessels might conduct a strike that destroys enough of the facility to create chaos. During this bombardment, assault boats deploy troops to extract the Inquisitor before final destruction of the site. This is a last resort tactic, likely to kill many prisoners along with the Orks, but it ensures that the Inquisitor at least has a chance of survival rather than certain death in captivity. However, rescue operations face significant complications. The Orks, despite their lack of sophistication, are formidable opponents on their own territory. But they know the stronghold's layout intimately and can mass forces quickly when attacked. Any rescue attempt risks turning into a pitched battle with the prisoners caught in the crossfire. There is also the question of identifying which prisoner is the Inquisitor. Stripped of their equipment and insignia, weakened by captivity, they might not be immediately recognizable. Rescue forces must locate them quickly before the Orks realize what is happening and either move them or kill them to prevent their recovery. Self-rescue through escape is theoretically possible, but extraordinarily difficult. The Inquisitor must overcome numerous obstacles: the physical barriers of cages or restraints, the constant presence of Orks throughout the stronghold, the lack of weapons and equipment, the distance to any safe Imperial territory, and their own weakened physical condition. Each of these challenges would be formidable individually. Combined, they create a scenario where escape seems nearly impossible. The optimal time for escape attempts is during maximum chaos, when the stronghold is under attack from external forces, when a major internal conflict erupts between Ork factions, or when most of the warband has deployed for a raid, leaving minimal guards behind. During these periods, Ork attention is diverted and opportunities arise. The Inquisitor might break their restraints using improvised tools or brute force, overpower or evade guards who are distracted by the larger conflict, and flee into the confusion. Successful escape requires preparation and opportunity converging. The Inquisitor needs cached supplies, food, water, some kind of weapon, even if improvised. They need knowledge of the surrounding terrain, gathered from observations during work details or conversations with other prisoners. They need a destination, an Imperial outpost, a settlement that might have Vox equipment, or at least enough distance from the Orks to allow rest and planning. And they need some degree of luck, as even perfect planning can be undone by an Ork happening to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The journey after escape presents its own hazards. The Inquisitor is weak from malnutrition and injury, traveling through hostile territory without proper equipment. They must avoid Ork patrols actively searching for escaped prisoners. They need to find food and water in an environment they do not know. They must navigate without proper equipment, using whatever natural landmarks or celestial navigation they can manage. Injuries must be treated with improvised medicine. Rest must be taken in hiding, never sleeping long or deeply enough to be caught unaware. Local resistance movements or partisan groups might provide assistance if they exist. On worlds under Ork occupation, some human populations fight guerrilla wars against their oppressors. These groups might help an escaped prisoner, especially one who identifies themselves as an Inquisitor and can offer support from Imperial authorities in exchange for assistance. However, Such groups are rare and difficult to locate, and not all are trustworthy. Some might be corrupted by chaos, or might see an Inquisitor as a threat to their own authority. Alternative Xenos forces present complicated possibilities. If Eldar, Tau, or other aliens are operating in the region, they might have their own reasons for opposing the Orks. An Inquisitor desperate enough might attempt to contact these forces and negotiate temporary alliance or assistance. This is extremely dangerous politically and spiritually. Any Inquisitor who cooperates with Xenos risks being declared radical or traitor by their peers. But survival takes precedence over ideological purity when the alternative is death or eternal captivity. The most bitter possibility is that no rescue comes and no escape succeeds, yet the Inquisitor survives through sheer endurance. They remain in Ork captivity for months or years, slowly deteriorating physically and psychologically until circumstances change. The Ork warband is defeated by other forces. The stronghold is destroyed, or the Orks simply lose interest in maintaining their prisoner populations and kill everyone. Even this grim scenario might lead to the Inquisitor's freedom if the attacking forces are Imperial, though they would be rescuing a shell of the person who was captured. Liberation through Ork defeat is perhaps the most likely scenario for many captives. The Imperium eventually responds to Ork invasions, marshalling forces to reclaim lost territory. When Imperial armies attack an Ork stronghold, prisoners might be found among the wreckage. Those who survive the final battle and can identify themselves are recovered, treated by Imperial medici, and eventually returned to civilization. For an Inquisitor, this means re-establishing their identity, reconnecting with their organization, and beginning the long process of recovery, both physical and psychological. The statistics are grim. Most prisoners of the Orks do not survive long enough for rescue or successful escape. They die of injury, malnutrition, disease, or simply being worked to death. Those who do survive often carry permanent damage, physical disabilities from poorly healed injuries, psychological trauma from their experiences, or spiritual corruption if they were exposed to chaos during their captivity. An Inquisitor has advantages that improve their odds: better training, enhanced physiology, stronger will, and greater importance to the Imperium, making rescue more likely. But even these advantages cannot guarantee survival. The aftermath. For an Inquisitor who survives Ork captivity, whether through rescue, escape, or liberation following the Ork warband's defeat, the experience does not end with their return to Imperial territory. The physical, psychological, and spiritual scars from their ordeal shape the rest of their life and service to the Emperor. The immediate aftermath involves medical treatment. Imperial medical facilities, whether aboard Navy vessels, at military outposts, or in proper hospitals on civilized worlds, begin the process of healing physical damage. Malnutrition is addressed through carefully monitored feeding, as a body weakened by starvation cannot immediately handle rich food. Injuries are assessed and treated. Broken bones that healed improperly must be rebroken and set correctly. Infections are fought with antibiotics. Damaged augmetics are repaired or replaced. And wounds are closed properly rather than with crude Ork stitching. Some damage proves permanent. An Inquisitor might have lost limbs to Ork experiments or injuries, requiring extensive augmetic replacement. Organs damaged beyond repair must be substituted with vat-grown tissue or mechanical alternatives. Scars cover their body, permanent reminders of beatings and torture. Their teeth might be missing, knocked out by Ork blows and never growing back. Fingers or toes might be gone, crushed in industrial accidents during forced labor. The proud, physically formidable figure who was captured returns as a scarred, partially augmetic shadow of their former self. Psychological recovery proves even more difficult than physical healing. The Inquisitor has experienced complete helplessness. It is something their training never truly prepared them for, despite attempts to simulate such scenarios. They have been at the mercy of aliens who saw them as nothing more than a useful object. They have witnessed and experienced horrors that would break ordinary people. Even an Inquisitor's formidable mental conditioning cannot fully shield them from the trauma of these experiences. Nightmares plague their sleep. They wake to the phantom sound of orc laughter, to the remembered smell of fungus and engine oil, to the sensation of crude hands grabbing them. Loud noises trigger panic responses, their body reacting as if they are back in the stronghold before their conscious mind can recognize that they are safe. Crowds become intolerable because they subconsciously search for green skin and tusks among the faces. Certain smells or sounds can trigger flashbacks so vivid that the Inquisitor loses track of their present surroundings, convinced for terrible moments that they have never truly escaped. The inquisitorial hierarchy responds to the survivor's return with a mixture of concern and suspicion. On one hand, the Inquisitor is a valuable asset whose knowledge and experience should be preserved. They have survived an ordeal that would have killed almost anyone else, demonstrating remarkable resilience. Their insights into Orc society and behavior, gained through terrible first-hand experience, could prove valuable for future operations against greenskin threats. On the other hand, any Inquisitor who has been in enemy hands for extended periods must be thoroughly examined for taint or corruption. The investigation begins almost immediately upon their recovery. Psychic examination to detect any warp influence, medical analysis for xenobiological contamination, extensive debriefing about everything that happened during captivity. Other Inquisitors conduct these examinations, understanding that their colleague has suffered greatly, but also recognizing that they cannot allow sentiment to override security concerns. The questions during debriefing are thorough and sometimes painful. The Inquisitor must recount every detail of their capture, their time in Orc custody, and their eventual escape or rescue. They must explain any compromises they made. Did they cooperate with their captors in any way? Did they provide information, even under duress? Did they witness things that might indicate chaos corruption within the Orc warband? The debriefing officials are not intentionally cruel, but they must know everything to assess both the Inquisitor's fitness to return to duty and any intelligence value from their experiences. Some Inquisitors face formal investigation by their peers, especially if their capture resulted from decisions or actions that seem questionable in hindsight. Did they take unnecessary risks? Did they ignore intelligence or warnings? Were there failures in planning or execution that could have been avoided? The investigation is not intended as punishment, but rather as learning experience for the Inquisition as a whole. Still, for the Inquisitor who has already suffered so much, being questioned about their judgment adds insult to injury. The determination of whether the Inquisitor can return to active duty depends on several factors. Physical recovery is assessed. Are they capable of the rigors of fieldwork? Have their injuries compromised their combat effectiveness beyond what can be compensated for with augmetics? Psychological stability is evaluated through extensive testing and observation. Can they function in high-stress situations? Do their trauma responses interfere with their judgment? Have they developed any pathologies that might compromise their effectiveness or create vulnerabilities for the Emperor's enemies to exploit? Some Inquisitors are deemed fit to return to duty, though often with restrictions or modified roles. They might be assigned to operations with lower physical demands, focusing on investigation and coordination rather than direct combat. They might be given time to fully recover, or months or years of light duty while they undergo therapy and reconditioning. They might be assigned mentors or partners who can provide support as they readjust to active service. Others are judged unable to return to fieldwork, at least not in their previous capacity. These Inquisitors might be assigned to administrative positions within the Inquisition, using their knowledge and experience to train new agents or coordinate operations from behind desks, rather than conducting investigations personally. Some take positions as advisors, consultants who can be called upon for their expertise without the expectation of direct participation in dangerous operations. A few retire entirely, granted honorable discharge after decades of service and given positions where they can continue to serve the Emperor without the burdens of active inquisitorial duty. The worst cases involve inquisitors who are too damaged to continue serving in any capacity. The physical injuries are too severe, the psychological trauma too deep, or the combination of factors too overwhelming for them to function effectively. These individuals might be placed in care facilities where they can live out their remaining years in relative peace, attended by medici and servants who understand their needs. Some prefer this fate, having lost the drive that once pushed them to face the galaxy's horrors. Others chafe at the restriction, feeling that they are being put out to pasture when they still have service to give. And a small number of inquisitors return to active duty against medical and psychological recommendations, driven by faith, determination, or simple refusal to let their enemies claim victory by breaking them. These individuals push themselves beyond what is healthy or wise, compensating for their limitations through sheer force of will. Some find renewed purpose in their continued service, using their trauma as motivation to fight even harder against the Imperium's enemies. Others slowly destroy themselves, unable to acknowledge or address their damage, until eventual breakdown or death in the field. The Inquisitor's perspective on their faith often changes after such an ordeal. Some find their belief strengthened, convinced that only the Emperor's protection allowed them to survive when they should have died. Yet they see their captivity as a test of faith that they passed, emerging with renewed dedication to their mission. They become more devout, more certain in their convictions, their suffering having burned away any doubts or questions about their purpose. Others struggle with their faith. They prayed for deliverance that did not come, or came only after months or years of suffering. They wonder why the Emperor allowed such terrible things to happen to one of his loyal servants. They question whether their survival was truly divine intervention or merely chance and their own resilience. These doubts are dangerous for an Inquisitor, whose authority rests partly on their absolute faith. They must either resolve these questions and reaffirm their belief, or they risk becoming cynical, losing the spiritual foundation that supports their work. As relationships with colleagues and subordinates change after captivity, other Inquisitors might treat their survivor colleague differently, showing either excessive sympathy or subtle distancing, neither of which the survivor particularly wants. Those who were never captured cannot truly understand what the experience was like, and their attempts at empathy, however well-intentioned, can feel hollow or patronizing. Conversely, some colleagues are uncomfortable around the survivor, as if captivity was somehow contagious, or as if the survivor has been tainted by their experiences. The Inquisitor's retinue, if any survived the incident that led to their capture, faces its own complicated emotions. They might feel guilt for failing to prevent their master's capture, or for not being captured themselves. They might be overprotective upon the Inquisitor's return, hovering and trying to prevent any situation that might lead to recapture. The Inquisitor must rebuild trust and working relationships with these individuals, establishing new patterns of cooperation that account for how both parties have changed. For some Inquisitors, the experience fundamentally changes their approach to their work. They might become more cautious, less willing to take risks that could lead to similar situations, or they might become more reckless, as if having survived the worst their enemies could inflict, they no longer fear death and push themselves into ever more dangerous situations. They might develop particular hatred for Orks, making the eradication of greenskin threats their primary focus for the rest of their career. Or they might avoid operations involving Orks entirely, unable to face the species that inflicted such trauma upon them. The question of public knowledge about the incident creates additional complications. The Inquisition might suppress information about the capture, not wanting to display any sign of weakness to the Imperium's enemies or to undermine confidence in the Inquisition itself. The Inquisitor might be instructed to never speak of their experiences, to pretend the time of their captivity never happened. This enforced silence can be its own form of torture, preventing them from processing their trauma by sharing it with others who might understand. Alternatively, The Inquisition might use the incident as propaganda, portraying the Inquisitor as a heroic figure who survived unimaginable horrors through faith and determination. Whilst this public version of events might bear only passing resemblance to the actual experiences, glossing over the worst aspects and emphasizing moments of resistance or defiance that may or may not have actually occurred. The Inquisitor must then live with this false narrative, maintaining the fiction while knowing the much grimmer truth. The long-term outlook for a survivor varies tremendously by individual. Some Inquisitors eventually integrate their experiences into their sense of self, neither defined entirely by their trauma nor able to forget it. They return to effective service, their understanding of suffering and helplessness, making them paradoxically more effective at their duties by giving them insight into what others endure. They use their pain as strength, transforming their worst experiences into motivation to prevent similar fates for others. Others never fully recover. The damage is too deep, the scars too profound. They might continue serving outwardly, but inside they remain trapped in that Ork stronghold, still helpless, still afraid, just better at hiding it. These Inquisitors might eventually be discovered and gently removed from service, or they might continue until some breaking point is reached and they can no longer maintain the facade of functionality. The aftermath of Ork captivity for an Inquisitor is, in many ways, a second ordeal following the first. The physical suffering ends, or at least diminishes to manageable levels, but the psychological and spiritual challenges continue indefinitely. The Inquisitor must find ways to live with what happened to them, as to incorporate these experiences into their identity without being destroyed by them. Some succeed, becoming even stronger in their broken places. Others fail, slowly crumbling under the weight of memories they cannot escape. All are changed forever by their time in the hands of the galaxy's most brutal Xenos. Conclusion: the Emperor's will endures. The scenario of an Inquisitor captured by Orks represents one of the most harrowing ordeals imaginable within the grim darkness of the far future. It is a test that strips away everything external: authority, equipment, support, even basic human dignity. What remains is the core of the individual, their faith, their will, their determination to survive and serve the Emperor regardless of circumstances. For an Inquisitor accustomed to commanding respect and wielding power, the experience of complete helplessness is transformative. They learn that their authority means nothing without the systems that enforce it, that their power derives not from themselves alone, but from their position within the Imperium's vast hierarchy. Yet paradoxically, they also discover that their true strength was never external. The training that allowed them to become an Inquisitor, the faith that sustains them through dark times, the core identity that makes them who they are. These cannot be taken away by any captor. The Orks, for all their brutality and violence, cannot truly break an Inquisitor who refuses to be broken. They can hurt the body, they can inflict suffering, they can reduce the Inquisitor to a wretched physical state. But the spirit, the consciousness, the essential self, more remains inviolate unless the Inquisitor themselves chooses to surrender it. This is the ultimate lesson of such an ordeal, that faith and will are the only possessions that truly cannot be stolen, only given away. The survival rate for Inquisitors captured by Orks is not high. Many die in captivity from injury, disease, malnutrition, or simply being worked to death. Others perish in attempted escapes or during the chaos of rescue operations. Those who do survive often carry permanent damage, physical and psychological, that affects them for the rest of their lives. But survival itself, under such circumstances, represents a victory. Every day lived is an act of defiance against captors who see their prisoner as disposable. Every moment of maintained sanity in the face of grinding horror is a testament to human resilience. What for the wider Imperium, the fate of a captured Inquisitor serves as a reminder of the constant dangers its servants face. Inquisitors are among the most formidable individuals humanity produces. Yet even they are not invincible. They can be overwhelmed by sheer numbers, caught by circumstance, or simply unlucky in ways that lead to disaster. The Imperium's enemies do not respect rank or status. An Inquisitor in chains is just another prisoner to them, no more significant than any other captive. This highlights the importance of the work Inquisitors do and the risks they accept in performing it. They hunt threats that could destroy entire sectors, investigate corruption that could damn billions, and face enemies that most citizens of the Imperium will never know exist. They do this knowing that capture, torture, and death are always possible outcomes. Their dedication to duty, despite these risks, exemplifies the spirit that keeps the Imperium functioning across 1,000,000 worlds. The Ork menace specifically represents challenges that require constant vigilance. The greenskins cannot be reasoned with, cannot be bought off, cannot be manipulated through traditional means. They must be fought with guns and blades, with courage and sacrifice, until they are driven back or exterminated. Every world they conquer, every human they enslave, every imperial servant they capture, represents both tragedy and call to action. The Imperium must respond to Ork aggression with overwhelming force, not out of cruelty, but from grim necessity, born of understanding what Ork victory means for human populations. For those who serve in the Inquisition or other arms of the Imperium, the story of an Inquisitor captured by Orks serves multiple purposes. It is a cautionary tale about the consequences of underestimating enemies or taking unnecessary risks. It is a testament to the importance of thorough planning, adequate support, and realistic threat assessment. It is a demonstration of what faith and will can accomplish when everything else has been stripped away. And it is a reminder that service to the Emperor sometimes requires suffering that cannot be avoided, only endured. The Emperor himself, seated upon the golden throne for 10,000 years, represents the ultimate example of endurance in the face of impossible suffering. For an Inquisitor trapped in Ork captivity, contemplating the Emperor's sacrifice provides both perspective and inspiration. If the Master of Mankind can endure such agony for millennia to protect humanity, then surely one of his servants can endure weeks or months of captivity. The scale is incomparable, but the principle remains. Duty and faith require sacrifice, and sometimes that sacrifice takes the form of simple survival rather than glorious martyrdom. The experience of Ork captivity, terrible as it is, can paradoxically make an Inquisitor more effective if they survive and return to duty. They have faced absolute helplessness and overcome it. They understand suffering in ways that cannot be taught. They know the psychological realities of captivity, torture, and degradation from direct experience rather than academic study. Whereas this knowledge makes them better able to understand and assist others who have endured similar ordeals, better able to evaluate the psychological state of interrogation subjects, and better able to assess what captives might have revealed under duress. Moreover, an Inquisitor who has survived such an experience often develops a more nuanced understanding of strength and weakness. They know that even the most formidable warrior can be overwhelmed by circumstances, that capture does not necessarily indicate failure or weakness, but sometimes merely bad luck or impossible situations. This understanding can make them more effective leaders, more capable of supporting subordinates who face their own trials, and less likely to judge others by impossible standards. The theological implications of such suffering also merit consideration. And in the imperial cult, suffering for the Emperor's glory is seen as holy and meaningful. A servant who endures terrible ordeals while maintaining faith demonstrates the power of belief and the Emperor's protection over his faithful. The Inquisitor's survival can be interpreted as divine intervention, proof that the Emperor watches over even those in the darkest circumstances. This interpretation provides comfort and meaning, transforming senseless suffering into holy trial and ultimate victory. Yet the Imperium must also acknowledge the practical realities. Torture and captivity are not spiritual exercises, but brutal realities that serve no greater purpose beyond the suffering itself. An Inquisitor captured by Orks has not been chosen for special testing by the Emperor, but rather has fallen victim to the random cruelties of a hostile galaxy. Faith provides comfort and strength, but it does not make the suffering less real or less damaging. The Imperium must support survivors with medical care, psychological counseling, and understanding, not simply praise their faithfulness and expect them to continue serving as if nothing happened. The question of how to prevent such incidents from recurring requires ongoing attention. The Inquisition must constantly refine its training, improve its intelligence gathering about Ork activities, and ensure that Inquisitors operating in areas with green-skin presence have adequate support and contingency plans. Their tracking technology must be improved so that captured agents can be located more quickly. Rescue procedures must be practiced and perfected. The lessons learned from each incident must be incorporated into training for future generations of Inquisitors. For you watching this exploration into one of the darkest scenarios in the Warhammer 40K universe, the tale of an Inquisitor captured by Orks illustrates fundamental truths about the setting. The galaxy is vast and hostile, filled with threats that respect neither rank nor status. The Imperium's servants face constant danger in their efforts to protect humanity. Even the most powerful and privileged among humanity can fall victim to circumstance and enemy action. And yet, the human spirit proves remarkably resilient, capable of enduring horrors that should break any sane mind, are sustained by faith, duty, and determination. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But within that endless conflict, there are also moments of courage, of sacrifice, of faith maintained against all odds. An Inquisitor surviving Ork captivity represents all of these. The courage to endure when escape seems impossible, the sacrifice of accepting suffering rather than betraying their principles, and the faith that sustains them through their darkest hours. The Emperor protects. This simple phrase, repeated throughout the Imperium, takes on profound meaning for those who have truly needed that protection. For an Inquisitor in Ork captivity, the Emperor's protection is not a physical shield preventing harm, but rather an inner strength that allows them to maintain their humanity, their faith, and their identity, despite everything their captors do to them. It is the knowledge that their suffering serves a purpose, that their survival is itself a victory, and that even in the depths of despair, they remain a servant of the Emperor and of humanity. If you found this deep dive into one of Warhammer 40K's darkest scenarios fascinating, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more explorations of the grim darkness of the far future. The Emperor protects, and through understanding the trials his servants face, we better appreciate the sacrifices that keep humanity alive in a hostile galaxy. Until next time, stay vigilant, maintain your faith, and remember that even in the darkest circumstances, the Emperor's will endures.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.